This is Robert Murlaci, the Mindshare Learning Report and Mindshare Learning here in Toronto, Canada. And I'm honored to welcome you to the inaugural EdTech Canada EdTech Leader Meetup, the launch of the first alliance. Today, we have got an esteemed panel of speakers from across North America. We're going to talk about EdTech trends and AI, of course, can't ignore that. And really, the EdTech Canada Alliance is about connecting Canada's EdTech sector to make an impact on student success and deal with issues at hand, like the impact of AI in business. And today we have a number of esteemed guests that are going to provide us some insight on that. So just a quick overview of the agenda. We have the introduction by me, our expert panel presenter introductions, a little bit about EdTech Canada, future directions. We're going to brief you on our upcoming summit, October 31st to November 2nd, the 15th Canadian EdTech Summit, next steps and wrap up. So with that, I'm going to introduce our awesome EdTech leaders here, and beginning with Emna. Emna Khan is a trade commissioner at Global Affairs Canada. Emna is at the Ontario Regional Office. She supports trade commissioner service at clients with international business development activities. Before that, at TCS, Emna worked in the private sector in supply chain logistics, account management fields. She holds an honors Bachelor of Arts from the University of Toronto and a master's in public service from the University of Waterloo. Next up, we have Ash Kulurachi, who is the CEO of Startup Ed. I had the opportunity to meet Ash in New York City at EdTech Week. You don't want to miss that. I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about that. He's a graduate with an MBA from Georgetown University, passionate in applying technology to solve challenges in education and work, advises and connects organizations in education, specializes in strategic partnerships, early stage investment to private equity in EdTech, and the future of work, emerging market ecosystems. Next up, Philip Fortin is the commercial specialist from the U.S. Commercial Service Office at the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa. We had the opportunity to meet last year when we were hosting our EdTech Summit in partnership with Ottawa U and the Ottawa Catholic District School Board. He is centered on identifying growth opportunities for U.S. businesses in specific Canadian sectors, including safety and security, sporting goods, passion of mine, and education. Leads the agency's initiatives related to the Canadian Arctic and Indigenous communities, which is super important to us. He also focuses on U.S.-Canada trade relationships through supporting small, medium-sized exporters, including their own minorities, women, and Indigenous people, done through 4 core pillars: export promotion, investment attraction, commercial diplomacy, and trade advocacy. Thank you for joining us, Philip. Jennifer Womble is quite the legend in EdTech. I've known her as long as I've been going to the Future of Ed conference, and that's over 25 years. So with a focus on spearheading dynamic educational technologies initiatives at the Future of Education Technology Conference, her role as conference chair involves curating content that empowers educators and administrators, leading a vast array of events from keynote sessions to interactive workshops. Her efforts are centered around enhancing professional development, tech education landscape. The pivotal aspect of position is fostering collaborative community that thrives on innovation, knowledge, and exchange. As the part of her editorial team at District Administration, she contributes to shaping the discourse and key education issues. Her expertise in curriculum design, development, gleaned extensive experience in education informs her approach to content strategy. Together, She delivers her perspectives to support educators creating secure and technology integrated learning environments. We connected at the ISTE conference. Jen is so passionate about sharing and connecting folks. I'm referred to as the connector in Canada. I've been called the godfather of EdTech, which, being Italian could be a little offensive, but we're from around Rome, not Calabria, so you're safe. But Jen is definitely the Uber connector in the US, and she's all over social media, sharing awesome insights. And it is quite a collegial community that we have. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
And we're looking forward to sharing some of your insights and your interesting work in the area of EdTech and trends that you see emerging, particularly around EdTech companies that are doing business in North America across the board. There are some 500 EdTechs that are doing business in Canada, either on the ground as Canadian companies and many US companies. Here's a snapshot. And as we did our research, and many of these are clients that we've worked with over the years, we felt that there was a gap in the connectedness of the companies, and there's a lot of common interests among these EdTechs, and many of them have attended EdTech Week as well as FETC. There's a lot of familiar and premium brands. Paper Learning is a good case in point. I'm sure Jen will touch on that one, that won our startup challenge, and we nurtured the CEO and collaborated with them, and they became a unicorn, a great success story in just 7 years. Prodigy and Smart Technologies, Nancy Knowlton, the founder, talked about taking 20 years to be an overnight success. But we've seen an acceleration point thanks to COVID and Gen AI. So that 20 years is probably reduced perhaps to 10 or more. It's a challenge to plan ahead, no doubt, these days. But one of the things we talked about are some of the trends that are emerging. So here's a sneak peek at the trends that we provided this past year. This is an annual thing that we put together based on the great work of our team and our advisory board and partners that share some of the things that are happening across the landscape. So without a doubt, Gen AI tops the list, along with digital equity is another emerging trend that out of COVID. And it's a great one because, one-to-one computing has really come a long way, even in huge districts like the Toronto District School Board with some 300,000 students. Peter Singh, the CIO, talks about how they pivoted and supported kids by, actually delivering devices to their homes during COVID. So I'm not going to get deep into each of these because they'll glean out of some of our presenters' conversations. But another important initiative that we're often part of, we host our Can-Am events, and Amna will no doubt talk about the trade missions and opportunities to connect with customers in Florida. This was a trade mission that we teamed up with Jen and her team, and Matt Waldron, Amna's colleague, who has the greatest gig. I want that in semi-retirement in Miami, of all places, as a trade commissioner. And we put together a small mission that was, very effective and made quite an impact. So we're looking to build on that. And just a quick note on the vision of EdTech Canada. It's really about, a professional learning community, supporting EdTech companies that are Canadian and companies that are on the ground in pre-K and lifelong learning markets. And it's the inaugural launch. We're the curators of this. We're going to evolve it to bring an advisory board together. And we want to hear from you and from the members, from the community, as to what some of their pressing challenges are that we no doubt have a pulse for, but it's always great to hear directly. So you can use the chat to inform us of any questions that you might have along the way today. So with that, we launched this. The challenge is, how do we communicate? And everyone is pretty much on LinkedIn. So we created at EdTech Canada, which is a new home for us to collaborate and communicate digitally. So with that, that will be an opportunity to really focus. And we looked at a number of other tools, but that's what we're going to go up with. And so, we're going to share job opportunities, upcoming events, trade mission events. AMNA will talk about funding opportunities and industry networking. We hosted our 29th Can-Am EdTech Meetup at ISTE, and we'll be hosting our 30th at FETC this coming January. And so, here's some of the benefits that new members could enjoy that are part of EdTech Canada. A little more about that, and networking jobs. Well, we're getting pretty deep into that. We created an interesting course, and it's free to those who join membership, and that's a micro credential around the business of EdTech 101. A lot of companies are recruiting new people, and oftentimes they might be educators but don't have that business acumen or insight. And we created a 10-module course you can get through pretty quickly on helping you pivot and transition. We tapped into some real legends in EdTech. I think Jen might be on one of the video interviews. Kathy Hurley, who's a 50-year veteran. We have some catching up to do on that one, Jen, we can probably say. But Kathy Hurley is my mentor from the Learning Company days, and when we launched Kevin O'Leary's startup in Canada, the Learning Company. Some of you may recall Raider Rabbit, Kid Picks, and Oregon Trail. And here I am 25 years later, after being sold to Mattel, I pursued my passion to continue to make those critical connections between education and business to support student success. So that's a free course that we're offering up. And without further delay, we're going to move on to our expert panel here today to share their insights and passions about learning and innovation. And Amna, I'm going to let you kick it off. You're on the ground here in Canada. You're schooled locally, which is cool. We talked yesterday, made some really cool connections. I'm going to stop my share so you can share your screen, and then we'll pass the baton over to you. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thank you, Robert. Okay. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. I'm very excited to have this conversation because, to your point, Robert, you mentioned how it's important to be connected. And that's something that I definitely find in my work with Canadian companies, and I'll go on a little bit about that. But I find that also to be true at the working level in terms of industry, government, and just the community in EdTech to know who else is in the space and how might we collaborate. So I'm just going to bring up my screen and give me a heads up when you can see it. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about how the Trade Commissioner Service works with Canadian EdTech companies and what exactly is it that we can do. And I want to spotlight one of our main programs that work on the business development in an accelerated way for these Canadian companies. Does that sound good? Okay, perfect. So my name's Amna Khan. For those of you who I haven't met with before, I'm very happy to be making your introduction today. And I work with the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service. I'm based out of the Ontario Regional Office, so downtown Toronto, although Today I'm teleworking from my own home office. So what we really do as a Trade Commissioner Service is that we support Canadian companies that are looking to grow in international markets, and that includes Canadian edtechs. And the ways that we're really trying to do that is by offering them insights and intelligence and connections that'll help them achieve their objectives in markets where they are primed to grow, where there's a real scope for what they offer, while reducing their risks and helping them save time and money. And essentially, the whole offer there is that we have a vast network. I'm based in Toronto, of course, but I have colleagues that are based in key markets around the world. So the real connect happens when we can talk to Canadian companies on the ground here and connect them with my counterparts abroad that can further connect them to our large network. And there's a huge, huge network. There's more than 1,000 trade commissioners in more than 160 cities around the world. So we have quite some coverage of those markets. Some of the ways that we work with Canadian companies is firstly the Canadian offices on the ground here, the Trade Commissioner Service, such as ours, and my colleagues across the country. We really try to assess new companies against our client criteria. And what we're really looking for is that the companies are ready to actually avail our services and to really make the most out of them to go to these key markets. So, is there a demonstrated capacity and interest to internationalize? That's a pretty big box that we're looking to check. As you know, exporting can be quite resource heavy. So, we want to make sure companies have a good idea of what to expect once they do start that endeavor. As well, we'll look to make sure that there is meaningful economic ties to Canada and the opportunity to really contribute back to the Canadian economy. So once we've assessed a company, what we'll offer them is key market insights. And that happens in the form of connecting them to my colleagues abroad, as well as providing market insights and studies and practical business advice, what they would need to be successful when they do start exporting to foreign markets, and connections with key contacts. As I mentioned, our network is quite robust and large, and we have the ability to connect Canadian business with qualified contacts abroad that they would need potentially for partnership or just in terms of setting up their business and doing everything that they need as smoothly as possible once they're in that market. Further, we help Canadian companies find new opportunities, and this can be in the form of sales opportunities or partnership opportunities, to name a couple. So we have, of course, our trade commissioners abroad who are finding these opportunities within their local markets and then relaying them back to us, where we share them with Canadian companies that we work with. And then finally, we help companies resolve business problems. So we don't get involved in legal disputes. We will refer sources and resources for that. But where possible, we'll advocate for Canadian companies in foreign countries on behalf of Canada. So those are some of the ways that the TCS works as a whole with these Canadian companies, with these Canadian edtechs. But what I want to highlight is the program called the Canadian Technology Accelerator, which is offered by the Trade Commissioner Service. And this is really an intensive business development accelerator. And the idea is to, over the course of the accelerator duration, to really help these companies get a kickstart and grow in key technology hubs. So the CTA is offered in 12 global tech hubs around the world. There's, of course, your usual suspects of the US markets that are key hotspots for technology. So you've got New York, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and you've also got Boston. But then we have coverage in other markets around the world, in Europe, in Asia. And what we really help Canadian companies do is to refine their approach to go to these markets. Each country demands something different, and we want to make sure that our companies are primed to succeed once they are there and access our network and get coaching and mentorship by industry leaders. That can be in the form of workshops, that can be in the form of one-on-one mentorship as well. Usually it's a mix of the two. And of course, B2Bs and potential opportunities to discuss and present themselves in front of potential partners or clients and so on. So the way that this has worked since COVID, basically after COVID, is that there's been a hybrid approach. And that's something that we still see going. It works pretty well because, of course, for some of the portion of that program, companies are able to do it from the ground here in Canada. And then once they're ready to go to market, then there's an in-market component usually around an anchor event, but it can also be something different depending on the program. So the program really works with Canadian companies in life sciences, clean tech, and ICT sectors. And of course, EdTech falls within the ICT space for the purpose of CTAs. It's been a pretty successful program, and these are just some of the results that we've seen from companies that have participated. About 81% saying that it improved their international business strategy, 90% saying that it improved their understanding of the markets, and of course, there are real metrics around job creation and revenue raised and all of that that you can see on the slide. I think, in my view, when it really works is where you see a clear fit between what the company is looking to do and what the program is offering. And that's something that I work with Canadian companies with on a one-on-one basis to support them. Relevant to this panel and to this audience is an upcoming USA EdTech CTA, so Education Technology program that we have that'll kickstart in October and go all the way until March. So it is over the span of 6 months. It is currently accepting applications, and I wanted to spotlight this because of its fit for this sector and this space. It's very much focused on the K-12 space. So companies that are right now working in instructional software, as well as administrative and data tools and professional training and courses such as that, they can make use of this program, and they should look at the details available. I'm happy to share more information afterwards as well. What I would suggest is that take a look at it. If there are any questions, just feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to connect you also to my colleagues that are running the program. In fact, I think that's encouraged because we want to make sure that you are making the most out of your time and fully cognizant of how pressed SMEs especially can be for time. So let's have that conversation, make sure that it's a good fit for you before you put in all the work of applying. But really what it will do is it'll help you get a deeper understanding of the US market, particularly in the K-12 space, provide you with the tools and coaching and mentorship that you need to prime yourself for that market and give you introductions to a very strong network of superintendents in the market, where you might find that otherwise pretty hard to come by, perhaps not that easily accessible. And you'll have a week of B2Bs with them. And so it's very curated. It's a huge value add. And how it'll work is that it'll, of course, use a hybrid model, as I mentioned earlier. So there are workshops with US education experts. There are going to be many hours of mentorship and strategy to really help you get prepared, one-on-ones and connections with the program alumni and other Canadian EdTech leaders. And this again goes back to that point Robert made earlier about knowing who else is in the space and finding that community. And my favorite piece is the ERDI Winter Institute in Palm Springs, California. And anyone who's aware of this or has kind of approached this or thought about it in the past can attest to how difficult it can be to really get that access and costly. Well, over here, it's free because the CTAs are free. The main thing that companies have to cover is their own travel and accommodation costs. And even that through CanExport, we can potentially offer funding for. That can be a little technical, depending on if funding applications are open. Otherwise, if companies have applied and they're trying to figure out how to make it work, that's something that we can talk about. But in any case, these are some of the ways that the program will work. I would encourage everybody that's interested to visit our website to learn more and apply, and of course, reach out anytime there are any questions. So I believe that's pretty much everything from me for now. Looking forward to the conversation, but I wanted to leave the audience with this slide where the TCS, as I mentioned, we have 6 regional offices across the country. So mine is third from the top in Ontario. Any companies that are based here, feel free to reach out to us if you would like to learn more about how we can support you. Other regions are also listed based on wherever your organization is headquartered. And I'll stop there. Thanks so much, Robert.
Thank you, Amna. Greatly appreciated. And next up, we are going to invite Ash Kaluarachi, the CEO of Startup Inc. in New York. And I'm going to stop my share so you can share your screen, Ash. And thank you for joining us this morning. How's the weather down in New York City? It's been a hot and rainy, torrential rains yesterday, actually, in Toronto.
You might as well be in the tropics here in New York, Robert. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for allowing me to join this esteemed panel. I'm going to keep my comments pretty short. I'd love to get into the Q&A as much as I can from the founders on the call. But as we have a deep introduction, I founded StartEd 10 years ago in New York City. Prior to that, I was an early employee at Techstars, running the EdTech vertical. We invested in companies like Newsella, Degreed, Learn Platform, Class Wallet over a couple of years in partnership with Kaplan. I helped Intel get their gears growing and investing in early education and initiated their tech programs. And then convinced New York University to invest in the space and initiated their accelerator programs as well. Became a little bit of a one-trick pony, supporting early stage innovation in the space. And then 10 years ago, I realized there's probably a better way to do this. I initially raised some investment funds to focus on invested in about 100 EdTech companies, but then realized, wait a minute, there's probably a more impactful, efficient way to support innovation at every stage. So we created training programs that help founders close funding, get customers, create visibility, find talent, and really just get to clarity, which is difficult to do in a complex space like education and in the US. I'm very glad and privileged to have worked with about 3,000 EdTech CEOs in the last 10 years. And we didn't do that in a silo as well. We created EdTech Week, which is our industry conference. It tends to be the only gathering in the Northeast for EdTech CEOs, as well as the stakeholders that support them. So this October, I'll share my screen quickly and let you know that the event is about to release its agenda. Actually, timing is very opportune. Later this afternoon, you'll see us release our curated agenda for K-12 early childhood, K-12 higher ed workforce learning. We have a great group of investors who are attending, both from the for-profit and not-for-profit sides. One of the key themes this year is the need for founders to seek and understand the 20 different kinds of capital that are available to impact-related organizations, when the focus tends to be around dilutive venture-based funding. In fact, that's only makes up a small portion of the funding that's available. So a lot of alternative funding resources we're introducing this year as well. And then in addition to the investment conversations, we're really pleased to bring together 150 speakers that represent very diverse leadership in K-12 higher ed and workforce. The event is leaning towards, was historically leaning towards K-12. This year, we're seeing that shift a little into higher ed and workforce, where inviting about 50 chief learning officers and L&D teams to participate, including a lot of the Fortune 50 CLOs. And lastly, we are really happy to have a home base that is New York's Tech Talent Hub, Civic Hall. It's 5 floors of state-of-the-art facility that we've centralized a lot of the activity around the festival. What we hope to do on the third day of the event, October 8th to the 10th, is to have host our learning labs across New York City on the third day. Sesame Street will be popping up their own event. If you care about making your own Muppet, you could, but also learn about how early childhood and AI are intersecting. There's a ton of schools and investment organizations like Global Silicon Valley that are opening up their doors but it's more like a fashion week for education. On that third day, you get to go travel around and get access to those spots around New York City that you might not necessarily have access to. So that's my little spiel around Started and EdTech Week. Welcome any questions in the Q&A. Thank you for having me here, Robert. Oh, Robert, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I have to say I had the opportunity to attend for the first time this past year, and I would highly recommend New York EdTech Week. Incredible new connections I made, so many great insights from industry and education leaders, very diverse range of presentations and people that you meet from around the world, really. And so really enjoyed it, and I definitely will plan to be back. With that, thank you again, Ash, and Philip Fortin, Commercial Specialist, U.S. Commercial Service, U.S. Embassy in Ottawa. Over to you, Bill.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to join today's conversation. And again, Robert, appreciate the opportunity to join such a distinguished group of panelists. I have to say, I did grow up on Reader Rabbit and Oregon Trail, so I appreciate the note
We have
there.
another success story. That's amazing.
Yes, yeah. Honestly, grade 4 to 5, those, yeah, during my recess breaks, we played a lot of that.
I'm glad to have played a small role in your education.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, I'll just share my slides here and let me know if you're able to see them.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, firstly,
you want to put them in presenter mode? Yeah.
Let's see if I can do that.
Go to. Yeah, there you go.
You know, I think I'll just. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, EdTech is very much at the forefront of education for the 21st century. I don't have to remind you that. And as Robert mentioned in my bio, I cover this sector from my office, and I'm really happy to do so because I'm in my position and in my capacity, which I'll share a bit later. I help develop partnerships between U.S. and Canadian firms, and that includes EdTech firms. And among some of the various sectors I work in, EdTech really stands out as one of the ones where I get to feel most engaged with startups, which is of course, really exciting. So the focus of my brief presentation, I'm going to share more about how my office supports US and Canadian EdTechs and growing the business on both sides of the world's longest international border, shared between Canada and the United States. So who are we? At the U.S. Commercial Service, we are the trade promotion arm of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we help U.S. companies really looking to export internationally. We know that there's tons of questions whenever it comes to bringing your product or service into an overseas market. So we're really there to help U.S. companies and guide some of their strategies. Now, in terms of our presence, we're uniquely positioned across Canada to help U.S. companies succeed. So as you can see on the slide here, we have 4 offices in Ottawa, which is where I'm based, out of the U.S. Embassy, and in Montreal, Calgary, and Toronto, with about 15 trade specialists, which all have their own various sectors that they cover. And even though we work for the U.S. government, most of our team are actually born and raised in Canada, like me, or are naturalized Canadian citizens. So before diving into the services we offer, I would be totally remiss if I didn't share a bit about the impressive and really growing trade relationship between Canada and the United States. Now, in terms of the bilateral relationship, we share the world's largest, most comprehensive economic relationship, valued at about 1.93 trillion US dollars. And just as a fun fact, this represents about $2.5 billion in US goods and services going back and forth across the border every single day. So it's a pretty sizable relationship. In 2023, Canada was the United States' top trading partner and was the #1 export destination for about 34 US states. Now, just as Canada is a priority market for the United States, the US market is also of great significance to the Canadian economy. And in 2022, approximately 77% of Canada's exports were destined for the US, and about 19 US states named Canada as their #1 source of imports. So how do we help Canadian and US EdTechs? So the services that we provide can really be nicely categorized into 4 different buckets, as you can see on the screen here. And the services available to US and Canadian companies are indicated by the flags on the right side. So on export promotion, this is where we provide a whole variety of different services, which includes trade counseling, market intelligence, where we help US companies conduct market research, and we provide the latest trends and opportunities in the markets, as well as business matchmaking. And this is one of our big services as well, where we help US companies who are ready to export to identify business partners in Canada and potential buyers for their goods and services. And we also can facilitate connections with key decision makers, both in the private sector and the public sector. On commercial diplomacy, this is where we help US companies overcome trade obstacles and barriers that may impact their business. On advocacy, this is where we provide support to US companies whenever they bid on a foreign government contract. And on investment, which is particular to Canadian companies looking to expand and growing their business operations in the United States. And I'll share more about this just in the upcoming slides. So I just want to talk a bit about US government support, specifically the Commerce Department supported trade shows and conferences in the United States for Canadian companies. See, our office, when it comes to these trade shows in the US, we often recruit delegations of Canadian companies to travel down to trade shows to meet with US companies. In previous years, we've had representation at some of the larger EdTech shows, for example, at FETC and ISTE, and we're really hoping to ramp up our presence in future years. The level of support that we provide to Canadian companies really varies year to year, but oftentimes we can provide complimentary or discounted registration to these trade shows, access to meeting spaces to meet with companies, as well as access to our business-to-business and business-to-government matchmaking programs and educational sessions that take place at the show. Now, just kind of going back to the investment piece that I talked about earlier, this is done through our Select USA program. This is a US government initiative program, which is led by the Commerce Department that helps Canadian companies looking to grow their business into the United States from an operational standpoint. This is a service that we provide to companies, investors that are really looking to identify where in the US market they would like to bring their products and services. We know US is a big country. There's 50 different states, 6 different territories. So identifying the right place to bring your business is often a challenge. We have resources and data and counseling services that we provide to Canadian companies to help them figure out which part of the market would be the best for them. Some of the events that would be worth considering for Canadian companies to attend include the Select USA Canada Conference, which is actually being held in your backyard, Robert, in Toronto, October 26th, and the Select USA Summit in May of next year, and this is going to be held in Washington, D.C. So specifically regards to the Select USA Canada Conference, this will be an excellent opportunity for Canadian companies that really want to learn more about the strategies and methods for setting up or expanding their business in the United States. At this conference, there's going to be the possibility to set up one-on-one meetings with US state and regional officials, expert advice from subject matter specialists in finance, taxation, immigration, and more. Now, looking at the Select USA Summit in DC next year, this is really an all-encompassing event, which is held annually and is considered a one-stop shop really for companies looking to invest in the United States. At this, there's representation from about all 56 US states and territories, and is really a great place to meet the state and regional decision makers that operate these economic development organizations that foster investment into their respective states. The 10th summit, which was held just a few months ago, was the largest summit in history, with about 5,000 international attendees from 96 different markets, with, as I mentioned before, representation from 60 US states and territories. It's a really much a growing event and would be worth traveling down to if you have the opportunity. So just one more slide I'd like to share is on Select USA Tech. Select USA also has a program which helps Canadian startups and other foreign startups who are operating more so at an early stage to look at investing into the United States market. So this features many of the same services provided under the Select USA banner. So counseling services, fostering connections with state and regional economic development organizations, uniques and intricacies of owning and running a startup. And one of the premier events that is held by Select USA Tech is actually at the summit, where startups are invited to participate in a pitch session where they can have about 3 to 4 minutes to talk about their business and how they see themselves growing in the US market. And this is usually involved in front of a panel of about 3 to 4 judges, which includes venture capitalists, corporate investors, as well as representatives from the startup ecosystems in the United States. So think of this Silicon Valley, as well as some of the investment hubs in Florida and other states too, where there's a larger base of investment. So I know I threw a lot of information at you. I think I may have gone over a bit of time, but just to quickly close, the U.S. Commercial Service is here to help U.S. and Canadian businesses. If you do have any questions about some of the work and assistance that we provide, we're happy to connect with you and further discuss. And my contact details can be found on the slide here. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. Great insight. And wow, I didn't realize that some of the services that you offer, so very helpful for you to, and including Canadian companies.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big piece of our work too, is really to facilitate those connections north-south, US, Canada, Canada, US. And
I look forward to perhaps attending that conference. That looks amazing. With that, I want to pass the baton to our next esteemed presenter today, Jennifer Womble, FATC Conference Chair.
Thank you so much, Robert. And I'm going to say I've been learning a lot today too. So it has been really an incredible panel and almost the full cycle, right? From starting your startup to getting invested to learning how to, trade abroad. So I'm going to close it out with, okay, how do you get buyers, right? And where do the buyers come from in the United States market? And one of the things that I would like to share a little bit about is FETC. And so, FETC is a national conference in the United States. Although we do represent all 50 states, we also have 60 countries. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about that Canada is our largest trading partner, and yet there's other countries you might be interested in working with also that are also at our show. So one of the things that happens at our event each year, as people convene from around the country, they're attracted to our event in 8 different tracks. So our focus is bringing leaders together to connect and improve education for all students. And the way that I'm informing the program is that we are looking through our magazine. So our magazine and publication is called District Administration. And there's some things I want to point out about district administration. It targets over 250,000 district level administrators from across the United States. So as been mentioned today, United States is a very large market. It is one that's very diverse and can be kind of difficult. So you need these assistants that you're getting today to get into this market. So in each state, the districts are designed slightly different. So in Florida, there might be 67 districts, and then in Texas, 173 ISDs, and then California, 270 city districts. So the way we are set up is different, the way they're led and the way decision-making happens is different. So we are cultivating content throughout the year to look at those trends that Robert mentioned earlier. And I was really grateful for the list that he put up there, because we are tracking some of those similar trends. And specifically that districts are looking to recruit and retain teachers. That's really high on our priority in America. We're looking at student attendance issues in America, which is what drives our funding, and what we can do to improve attendance. And we can talk a little bit about ESSER and ESSA and some of that funding that's tied to that. A lot of focus on student engagement and how students are engaged in learning and what we're providing in the classroom for them. And of course, mental health continues to be a large issue. So the products that you all are creating and bringing to market, addressing a lot of the problems and solving the problems that school districts in America have, are very welcome at our event. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there are pathways for AI to solving all of those issues that I just mentioned. And we're seeing products come to market this year in the last 6 months that are addressing all of those. And it's really exciting. And one of the things I wanted to point out about DA as well is they do have a top EdTech product award program. So products that are in market, both startup and veteran products, can apply for those awards. And so I encourage you to, those are open until October and recognized at our event and then throughout the year. So one of the things that happens at FETC that we've alluded to a little bit is we have a very dynamic Pitch Fest event. That event is held on our show floor and very well respected. We're in our 10th year. But in order to have access to these attendees that are coming to FETC, and like I mentioned, 8 different areas. So we're focusing on district leaders, campus leaders. We focus on inclusive technology leaders. We also have coaches and coaching leaders that are coming to our event. We've got classroom leaders and educators from across the country, as well as a new track this year in esports. So the massive growth that we're seeing happening with esports in America warranted its own track this year. So you will be able to at FETC attend sessions to learn all about the different skills that are being needed in classrooms to improve education, but as well as all the products that are being used. So we do conduct over 600 sessions and workshops, but that is in line with a very large expo hall with over 450 companies. So in the middle of that is our Pitch Fest, which is really exciting. So what kind of opportunities are there at a large national conference for budding firms, whether you're a startup or an existing company? So one of the things about FETC is it is the first EdTech event of the year. So that timing is actually really great to bring new products to market and also to have updates, to train people on the updates on your products. That's what we're seeing with a lot of our new AI enhanced products. So tools that we're already using but have added, AI tools. This is a great time to bring those product updates to all of your customers and then put it in front of buying teams. It's really important in the budget cycle in the United States. Typically, most school districts will approve their budget in February for the next school year. So you want to be in front of the districts and showing them your tools and getting their involvement before they're building out their strategic plan and budget for the following year. So that is why FETC is in January. It's also a beautiful time to come to sunny Orlando, especially if you've been in the cold Canadian winters. But that is definitely a key ingredient, is getting your product in the right timing with schools. You also have the opportunity to network with all the attendees that are there. All of our participants participate in all of our receptions. We host a 2-hour lunch break on Thursday and host lunch for everyone, coffee breaks every morning. So there's lots of opportunities to meet the people that you're interested in talking to. It might take a little effort and planning and if you do it right, you can leave with a lot of connections. And I think that all of us have mentioned today the power of relationships and making connections, and that hopefully is one of the great things you'll take away from any conference that you attend. So FETC is the largest gathering of strategic decision makers in America. So it is the people who are making buying decisions. They're making decisions for their districts and then also for their state. So we host the state EdTech directors as well. One of the things that's very popular is to set up conversations around beginning pilot programs. So schools and districts are there and available to discuss that. They're eager many times to try new products that are coming to market. It's a great place to present ideas and get feedback. And then, of course, Robert hosts an amazing Can-Am reception, which we've mentioned before, where those conversations, meeting people who've been through this process, can really glean a great information for you to move forward with your company. And then, of course, there's Pitch Fest. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those. We have seen some really dynamic successes that have come from this partnership and been highlighted at FETC. I host a CEO panel every year, and this year was exciting. 2 Canadians were on the panel. You may recognize Phil Cutler here from Paper, as well as Serinda Swan from Blueprint Kids. And so one of the great things is bringing those voices and elevating them to FETC, talking about their products, their successes, and also allowing CEOs to have a conversation about what they care about working with schools and districts. And it's been very, very welcomed. Their success has started out with a small 10 by 10 booth on the floor and grown, and been elevated into very large successes. So we're happy to be a part of that. And then just recently, I'll share another Canadian success from this summer. This is CETA director Julia Fallon and then Eric Tao of Megaminds. And so they won the CETA Pitch Fest event over the summer. And then we were able to host Megaminds on our summer webinar series. So FETC hosts year-round webinars that we continuously are engaged with our audience. One of the ones this summer was AI tools for students, and Megaminds was able to come and join us after winning that Pitch Fest, or she called it Shark Tank, right? Shark Tank event. And the amount of contacts and leads that he got from that webinar, he told me at ISTE almost overwhelmed them. They couldn't fulfill them quick enough. So those kind of partnerships that where we can help elevate your voice and bring products to market are really, really dynamic for both the users. So Pitch Fest and FETC is in its 10th year. The applications are open now. So if you want, if you're an early stage startup and you'd like to participate on our website, you are able currently to apply to be a part of it. There are prize packages involved with it. The finalists give their pitch. It will be hosted this year all day on Thursday, January the 16th. And so I encourage you to apply early. Kyle Steele runs this program for us. It's found a lot of success, and we're happy to host that every year. I definitely got to give a shout out to Robert in being able to connect businesses at FETC. He does host a very large reception at the event, connecting, what's happening in Canada to the US, bringing those partnerships together with the right CIOs, the right school district superintendents, the right people in the room. And that is really powerful for elevating your business. So I invite you to come to FETC and be a part of it, and join our conversations year round through webinars that we have. Subscribe to DA district administration newsletters and be in tune with what's happening in these markets and keep apprised of that news, which many of the things you're developing are solving the problems that that education is facing in this really exciting time. So I definitely am open to any questions. You're able to email us and contact us through the webpage. But I think that's a little bit of a fast overview of some events. Meet the people that you need to become your new customers. And Robert, I am happy to turn it back over to you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Incredible insights today. So inspiring. I just love the passion that everyone exudes about our community. And what's interesting over the years, and there's been many, literally it's 25 years ago that this year that I launched the learning company, Kevin O'Leary's company in Canada as a startup. And the people that I still am connected with, like Jennifer and Kathy Hurley and many others, it's remarkable that, you know, people are so passionate. You don't leave this sector because you feel good about the impact that you're making, right? It's not just about money. It's, although it's important to sustain ourselves, but it's really about the community, and it's so special. You know, thank you for the shout out on the Can-Am event, because it's really become a signature event at FETC, and we're a proud media partner annually as well. And Jen has been the ongoing, you know, sustained quarterback of that conference. Despite all the ownership changes, there's been continuity, and you put your fingerprint on FETC, if you will. And it's so grateful to have that important connection and ongoing partnership. And that's a really important point about the community and relationships. Many organizations change over time, and if you don't have multiple relationships, that creates an issue because you have to start from ground zero. A case in point, like a Smart Technologies went through a whole transformation after they were sold. And it took a while for me to, you know, navigate the channels. But as an example with FETC, I've always had that champion in Jen Womble at FETC. So why don't we, you know, open this up to more of a panel conversation around some of the issues and challenges at play. And I know that the ESSER funding is coming to a wrap in September. There are a lot of rumors, and I know, Jen, you're very on top of this, and I'm sure Ash, as you would be as well, and no doubt Phil. There's been money that hasn't been spent. I've heard rumors about an extension to school districts for Canadian companies, EdTechs doing business in the US. What is the situation as it stands now? Ash, do you want to shed some light on that? And then over to Jen, and Phil perhaps might have some insight too.
Sure. And I'm happy to share some numbers about this as well. I'll just briefly pop up something on my screen, Robert, if you could allow me to share.
Yeah, I'll stop. And you know, I hear about the funding cliff. Is it a cliff, or what is the situation? Because, you know, billions of dollars were spent during COVID and post-COVID made available, but where are things at?
Yeah, and with the permission of one of our partners at Burbio, I'll share these numbers. So a lot of money was deployed, right? So you'll see on SL1 at about 30 billion, that got up to all the way up to about 170 billion and change that was deployed in districts across the US across COVID. Now, 90% of that went to districts and 10% to particular states. What remains is a little bit of a ESSER headache or hangover, right? There's a ton of spending that went into the school systems that was allocated as it should be into things like high dosage tutoring and remedial content and curriculum. A lot of it went into paying educator wages, which is much needed. What I don't think most folks with good intention realized was that when that that funding was scheduled to cease, what happens then, right? We were focusing on a relatively short-term problem. Now that cliff, as you refer to, the deadline for commitment around that funding is at the end of September. So, not even 2 months away. There is extension deadline as well, that is at the end of January next year. There's a lot more to this conversation, but I want to certainly give my fellow presenters a chance to give their perspective. But I wanted to kind of frame where the situation is, at least from a problem perspective.
And Ash, I don't know if you have in that same slide deck, but one of the things that was really interesting that Burbio shared is the amount of districts who have not spent the money that's available and have not encumbered it. So they do have to encumber it by September and then, spend it by the end of next January. So there is a very large pot of money that's out there currently that has not yet been encumbered. So that's definitely a real challenge for districts. There are some issues on top of that that are making that happen. For example, in the summer is when a lot of superintendents turn over. So some school districts are changing leadership roles. And so if you walk into a new district, it takes a few minutes to figure out what's been spent and what hasn't been spent and what's been allocated. So there's some other things in a line there, but there definitely is some funding out there. Yes, exactly. The amount, here's a great sample of the amount of money that still has not been encumbered for many different reasons in school districts, but hopefully they will take advantage of that. I love, Robert, the rumor that it could be extended. That would be great. I don't know and any answers about that. I will say that so ESSER funding is supplemental, but the basic funding, which used to be that No Child Left Behind money, is now ESSA money, ESEA money. That money does increase every year by law. So the basic budget of school districts does increase by law. It's the supplemental, income to districts that is, right now a short-term kind of catch if you can get districts to use it right away. So that's an interesting piece, that there is still a lot of unencumbered money that has to be done by the end of September.
Is there any correlation to district performance and money invested? Is there any correlation with that? Some may be more on top of their game than others, the way they manage the district budget.
I think there's some research happening around that. There's definitely some of the items, there were 6 categories, 6 pillars of items you could buy with that money. And a very large part of it were things that were COVID related, health related, masks and hand sanitizer and things. So that would be a little bit more difficult to align, but I'm sure there are, lots of groups who are looking at how those expenditures were aligned when it was helping to facilitate more one-to-one learning. One of the big ahas was there was a little bit of an assumption that districts all had one-to-one programs, but we saw as soon as shutdown happened, how many needed to buy laptops and tablets for students and really were not one-to-one and did not have the infrastructure and the bandwidth in their communities for that. So I'm sure there are lots of things that as this money ends, there we'll see some of that research come out, hopefully really successfully.
It really speaks to that innovator's mindset that it needs to be ongoing. You just don't innovate in times of crisis. And I think post-COVID taught us that a real lesson in the power and potential of tech-infused pedagogy. In a crisis, it wasn't elegant, but kudos to the EdTechs, many of whom are on listening and participating here, that you enabled it to continue to sustain. Otherwise, there would have been pretty much zero learning. Thoughts? Philip Fortin, do you want to chime in with any insights you might have around funding?
So on funding, honestly, I'm not too familiar with the ESSER and some of the challenges that we're kind of going over. I think Ash and Jen covered them quite well. But when it comes to funding, though, if I can just tie it back to some of the work that I do, We do offer funding and grants to help offset the cost of some of our export promotional services. So if there are U.S. companies that see an opportunity in markets, there are grants that are available on a state-by-state basis and on a case-by-case basis for them to access those opportunities to promote their products in Canada. But from a funding perspective, I unfortunately don't have too much to share on that.
No worries. I'm sure you can find some the right person to provide some more insight. No doubt, if people wanted to follow up with you on that.
That's right. Yeah. The uniqueness of my role is I'm really much a connector.
Right.
If there's a question that I can answer, I can of course find someone to help steer them in the right direction.
Right. So one of the rumors I heard, and I don't know if it's accurate, is that if a Canadian company at some point, this came up, wanted to do business in the US, you had to have an office based in the US. Does that still hold true?
I think it depends on what they're doing. If it's an export of a good or service,
right,
that's fine. You don't have to have a US operation.
Right.
But if you're looking at establishing some sort of address to have a branch plant or an office space, a workspace, for example,
or people professional learning is an example.
The ins and outs, I'm not entirely sure about
it presents some challenges if you are Canadian looking to work in the US and live in the US. You have to get proper credentials, I understand.
Yeah, there is the US working visas that you can apply for. And actually, the US Embassy does have a fairly good consular section that can help provide advice to Canadian business owners and investors who are looking at getting access to those types of work and investor visas. So if there's an opportunity that a Canadian investor sees, I can definitely put them in touch with our consular section here at the embassy to make sure that they have all the proper visa requirements that they must have.
Thank you for that. Amna, do you want to chime in on funding, perhaps?
So I can speak to the funding that we provide. Like Phil, I'm not aware of the ins and outs of the ESSER piece either. But, and it's interesting, Phil, being on a panel with you, because it's like looking at my US counterpart, and a lot of what we offer is the same, two sides of the same coin. But in terms of funding that we have available for Canadian companies, we do support them with export development activities. And the Trade Commission Service in Canada offers funding under a flagship program called Can Export. A lot of interest in that funding. Year after year, we find ourselves oversubscribed and hit with even more applications than we had last year. But that's a great problem to have, that it's popular. It does speak to the need for making sure that companies are putting forward a competitive and thorough and well-timed application. I think timing is as important as preparation. And that's something that I support Canadian EdTechs that I work with directly on a one-on-one basis. And that we also offer support to other sectors. So it's, we work on a sector basis as well within our regional offices in Canada. And I have a large team of colleagues who cover other spaces and industry. So that is something that regional offices are able to support Canadian companies with. Whenever there's an interest, I recommend reach out to a trade commissioner here to get some of that support before you apply, because chances are we can help you take a look at your draft and find things that can be fine-tuned to make it a stronger application. One other thing that I wanted to touch on, Robert, just to the previous point around, and this is something that Jen alluded to as well in her presentation, but each state, each district, the requirements are so different. And where we support Canadian companies in that sense is a connection to my colleagues that are based in those markets. So we have quite a lot of coverage in the US. Of course, there are trade commissioners in New York, some of whom he works with as well in Florida, of course, with Matt Waldron and Jen at the FETC and the Can-Am Mixer. And then Robert, of course, with David Smith in Denver, right. So ISTE. And the list goes on. So there's quite a bit of trade commissioner coverage in the US, and we can support Canadian companies that are trying to navigate those markets and get specific intel on those regulations and conditions.
And I could add that, as you alluded to, the accelerator program And the deadline's coming up very quickly in August, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You have a consulting partner, Rise Consulting, that offers great insight for those companies that are looking to make those critical connections and tap into those funds in the US where they're available and where their product is the best fit, really. At the end of the day, it's making those connections and finding what the priorities are, going onto the school district websites and doing your homework, looking at the school district improvement plan, and being laser focused. When you do your homework, Bryce Taylor, a former professor of mine in sport admin, wearing my other hat back in the day, always talked about us doing our homework, and it doesn't stop when you graduate from university. It's really super important. Well, speaking of doing homework,
Robert.
yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, Jen.
Robert.
Yep.
I was going to mention that learning needs to continue with funding, because the funding in the United States and then these groups can help you in these training programs would really be helpful, because our funding in the States is going to be slightly different in the coming years. So since COVID, we've had some non-attendance issues. So in the United States, our funding is based on seat time, which means students in schools. So as that federal funding might decrease because less students are in schools or in different types of schools, charter schools and private schools, what's happening is many states are shifting to more of a grant model where they're funding schools through various grants, so that's an important thing for a lot of companies to know, is it how funding happens. And funding doesn't just happen through the Department of Education. We've just had a very large cybersecurity bill that's been passed, $20 billion, but it's Department of Homeland Security,
Right.
Department of Commerce. So funding for schools in the States right now is not just coming from a single funding source, it's coming from multiple sources. So if companies will continuously be on a learning cycle about the finances in school in America, those programs would be really helpful for them.
You raised a really good point, because there's Title I funding, Title III, some of which I don't really fully understand, being in Canada, but there are many pockets that you can tap into. Any other thoughts?
Exactly.
Ash?
So these programs are really important.
Yeah. Ash, did you have any final thoughts to share on the funding side of the equation? Great insight, by the way, with that
sure.
data.
Yeah, let me take the broadest definition of funding for this last part of the conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to this, as I mentioned before, but when it comes to finding investment in your organization, whether that's dilutive or non-dilutive, then there's a checklist of funding that we track across the US. On the screen, probably in too little font. On the right-hand side, you'll see all 20 of those types of investments, and the motivations behind them vary, the business models vary. So understanding what those investors want and what the expected return and timeline and their relative patience is important to figure out who's more immediately relevant versus who you want to keep on a back burner. But in a broad perspective, I think if there's one thing I'd ask the folks online to walk away with, realize that these 5 types, the ones in white are kind of more traditional, have existed for a while. They involve venture capital, they involve angel investment. There's a version of that has a social impact layer that terms itself an impact fund. But these three kinds in a font of color, revenue-based financing, strategic investors, and foundations have really changed how they deploy capital over the last 10 years. Sometimes even non-dilutive, and basically fund based on your accounts receivable or prospects in the future. Strategic investors showed up a lot of money and cash over the last few years during COVID, and now are going to market and acquiring and funding partnerships. They tend to be a great way to get to large swaths of the market as well. And then finally, foundations have really upped their game from yesteryear. They are far more sophisticated and more complex organizations deploying mission-related investments, MRIs, and then PRIs, which are project-related investments. Knowing the distinction between those, again, could save a founder up to 6 to 12 months of effort going down the wrong path in funding. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, great insight, Ash. Fantastic. Thank you. A great wrap to that piece of the conversation. I would be remiss if I didn't mention AI and Gen AI and how you have to be, as an EdTech founder, owner, executive, you need to embrace Gen AI as part of your product roadmap and just general business operations. We use it every day, and we're integrating it and continually working to make improvements and enhancements. Who wants to take on this one and talk about their world and how Jen, you look like you're chomping at the bit there. So I know you are a real innovator, and as George Couros would say, you embrace the innovator's mindset, and you are the epitome of the innovator's mindset. So over to you.
Yeah, I will say that those of us in EdTech, at least the last 6 months have almost been volcanic with an eruption of products. We've seen massive amounts of funding going to some of these companies. I mean, I think most recently Magic AI got the most funding recently. And we're definitely seeing some excitement around this for a couple of reasons. One is that the teachers in the classrooms who are starting to use it are having incredible levels of joy. It's alleviating some of the inefficiencies that they've had. The auto grading in particular is saving an enormous amount of time for many teachers. So we see that. We also see high levels of student engagement. So those two pieces are really just almost selling themselves. However, I'll pause with some information, some data that just came from Burbio last week. And they released and they review the school board minutes of K-12 school boards from across the country. And what they found is that less than 20% of school boards are actually having these conversations, and less than 5% have come up with a policy. So this is still very early stages for school districts in America. There's some very large, sophisticated districts like LACOE who've come out with guidelines. And there's a handful of districts who are implementing it, but they are very early stage. Most districts are still trying to educate their parents and their faculty. There's a large need for AI literacy training, defining what AI is, defining what AI literacy is. Then that will need to be put into some standards-based curriculum for schools. So this is a much longer road ahead. It's also raising a lot of questions about redesigning education from assessment forward. So it's a real exciting time in education. There are definitely people on the cutting edge who are using some of these tools. We see it AI embedded in tools. And then it's bringing up a lot of policy questions. So for example, if I'm wearing my AI glasses and their prescription, when I'm in the classroom, a teacher cannot ask me to take them off because they are my prescription. And so the AI will be, ubiquitous in their classrooms, whether they introduce it or not. So a lot of school districts have a lot to consider, and they are all right now getting ready to bring people back for the fall. And this is a big part of the training. We're actually doing a webinar tomorrow with district leaders from around the country to see where they are and how they're bringing AI into the school districts. But It's going to explode, whether at the district office, we see them rerouting bus routes, making more efficiencies there. It's becoming the help desk, communication chatbots, and then also what's happening in the classroom. So you're going to see AI elevated in both areas, but it's going to be a fun fall, and I cannot wait till January to see where we are after the next 6 months.
Well, great insight. Is that an open session tomorrow? Is it tomorrow? You said you're.
Yeah, tomorrow it's free. It's our
Okay.
FETC monthly webinar. We've got superintendents, we've got Saba coming on to talk about where districts are and what they're employing with AI this
Oh,
fall.
I will plan to join that one. Did you
Yeah,
put your
definitely.
AI glasses back on?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Are you gonna take a photo of us?
I already did.
Yeah, that's I was looking at one of the other brands, and you actually see the cameras, and apparently it lights up if you take a photo. So you know the person's taking the photo. Kind of creepy. That part is creepy to me.
Yeah. But they are great for, I am actually just speaking to
Right.
ChatGPT most of the day. I can do emails much faster. I can work much faster. I can get answers to questions a lot faster.
So
So
it's audio activated.
Mhm.
That
Absolutely. And so there's a tiny speaker. I can play my own music while I'm sitting here, and when I wear them on the airplane, no one can hear it. Mhm.
that is brilliant. Which brand is that?
These are actually a brand that's made in Florida. Go figure. I can show it to you. Let me see if
Yeah,
I can put it over here. Yeah, it's Lucid,
Lucid. I've
LEUC.
been getting emails from them, and do you recommend them?
Yes, you can get them in prescription. I have them in
Yeah,
sunglasses and regular glasses, and they come prescription or non-prescription.
cool.
And they've been fantastic. I mean, there's many different brands that come into
Yeah.
market, but these I've had for a while. They're much more economical. But definitely, you're going to see, surprisingly, one of my sons, about 5 years ago, had a pair of Snapchat glasses that recorded video and did some of the similar things, but these are actually tied to ChatGPT.
Does it connect to your computer,
You
your
could,
phone,
but I prefer to do it to my cell phone.
your cell phone? Okay, that's remarkable. I'm a big fan of using the right tool at the right time to create efficiencies or enhance learning, and that's a great case study as to how it could be so effective. And so I'm going to look at that. So full disclosure, these are not AI glasses; they're reading glasses, but I may have to get an updated version um, for this fall. So this is a document that we produce. So wearing another hat, I'm CEO and co-founder of C21 Canada, Canadians for 21st Century Learning and Innovation. We launched a dozen years ago or so. Similar to P21 in the US, we felt there was a need to accelerate innovation in education. So we did our part because Canada does not have a national Department of Education. It's regional jurisdictions equivalent to state, provinces are equivalent to states, and we have 3 territories. So we lag behind about a year. This report was released in May. So we did a global and national scan. We have 24 national literacy AI projects that are launching in September. So we have a onboarding this summer, and then we're going to report at our upcoming EdTech Summit. And really, and my colleague Karen Yamada so eloquently was quoted here. It's those the essential skills that kids need today to be agile and adaptable to the ever-changing environment is absolutely critical. Digital citizenship, you know, uh, digital awareness, digital equity, all these things come into play, knowing what's real and what's not real, right? And self-regulation. There is a movement in Canada, and I noticed that it's happening in the US, about new cell phone policies, keeping the cell phones in your bag and not having them out. Now, it gives the teacher agency to take them away or allow them to use them if it's purposeful, right? So, but I want to stay on the AI track. Um, uh, Phil, do you want to jump in, or Amna, and talk a little bit about how AI is impacting your world and what edtechs should be mindful of?
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to talk a bit about AI, and if I can kind of just break it down into two different segments, I guess. So, in the work that I do, it's very much informing U.S. companies about some of those trends and opportunities in the market, and I find generative AI has been really good to help kind of understand what some of those trends are, compile it in an easy to read and easy to communicate fashion. As Jen mentioned before, in her own day-to-day work, such as emailing, finding quick answers to the questions that we get every day. So it really just helps streamline a lot of our work. We do have to be careful though, because the information that we do get sometimes may not be entirely accurate. So there's a lot of fact checking that you have to do whenever you get information from some of these sources, because it does typically vary. And just in the second bucket too, is I'm seeing a lot of creativity from U.S. companies when it comes to using AI in their own work, internationally speaking. So I'm seeing it being used to help translate documentation, as well as some of their marketing information, because as we know, Canada is a bilingual nation in English and French. So one of the big pieces of advice we give to new to export U.S. companies is that the materials, their product information, and their website have to be translated in both official languages. So we're seeing it used in that. One area we're seeing it used as well is in marketing information too. So for example, like content creation, adapting to the specific needs and interests of the different regional pockets that we have here in Canada. And as well too, just from like a regulatory perspective and policy perspective, we're seeing a lot of U.S. companies use AI to ensure compliance by understanding what is being given to them through some of these chatbots. And like I mentioned before, a lot of it has to be fact checked, but it's at least what it does is it provides a nice foundation for a lot of these companies to quickly understand the legislative frameworks we have here in Canada and abiding by some of the policies that we have. So it amazes me to see the creativity that U.S. companies are using AI for, and it's exciting. It really, really is.
Thank you for that. Amna, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I agree. I think a theme that we all kind of agreed on is that companies are moving faster than policy and, traditional decision-making strata. And I think that at least that conversation started. Hopefully, I mean, Jen, whenever we meet next, that number of school boards and districts discussing it in their meetings is going to go up. It's certainly something that's still very much, and suddenly companies are moving much faster. They've been more open to change. And within Canada, of course, there's a strong tradition of innovation, especially within the EdTech space. And it still amazes me how quickly companies are jumping on generative AI and even trying to figure out how they might solve a challenge that they're already addressing in a different way using generative AI. And so I've seen a lot of that in my work with Canadian EdTechs. In my own space, in my own work, I'm, trying to be a little bit more cautious because we have to. We are very, responsible for the information we're putting out. I'm trying to figure out how we can use these tools while still meeting the codes and of conduct and everything that we're bound by. But I'm excited by this. I think AI is something that is it was current last year. It's current this year. It's not going away anytime soon. It's only going to grow. And I found that even at conferences that are not typically known to be, hubs for EdTech, for instance, Robert, Collision just this June in Toronto, where we were both attending. AI was the major theme, right, of discussion and major content track, and we hosted you and the panel. Thanks again for doing that. It was a very insightful discussion of how to navigate AI-inspired EdTech in Canada and beyond. And one of the best ways, especially, while it's still a conversation that decision makers and policymakers are having, to learn and to know what's happening, is to connect with other Canadian edtechs and others that are in the space and trying to navigate the same challenges and the way forward. So I always learn a lot when I attend these and whenever we work together, and looking forward to staying in the loop and very much engaged in that discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, it was excellent partnering with you on that. And let's talk about the importance of partnerships and networking. I'm finishing my book this summer, The Art of Networking in the Age of AI. And I'm really passionate about helping people optimize their relationships. And post-COVID, it's been interesting and challenging at times to make new connections and stay connected with people, generally speaking, because we spent a good 2 years cocooning, if you will, and then all of a sudden we're back to business, and people aren't all in the same mindset, if you will, and the state of well-being is a bit of a challenge as well. And so being mindful of one of the tips I'm going to share in my book is every day I call a friend or a colleague to stay connected as a habit, so that in the course of the year, I've had all these connections. The worst thing is when you hear from someone that you haven't heard from in 2 years, and they're wanting you to help connect them for a career change. That doesn't sit well with me. It just doesn't feel good. It's not authentic. I mean, if I went to Jen and said, Jen, I'm looking for a career change, can you help me? Well, my daughter says no one would ever hire me, first of all. So I'm not, I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm saying. You are the Uber connector.
Well,
having a footprint, a digital footprint, and being present, understanding your role, whatever your role is in the organization. If you're a CEO, you're a thought leader, right? If you're a sales director, you need to be sharing differently, right? Thoughts, Jen?
Well, Robert, I'll speak to that a little bit because, I'll speak to that a little bit because what's been interesting is that in this AI conversation, the way, and I can even share my screen and show something that was interesting to me, is that the Department of Education first put out some guidelines about, what they would recommend, right, for AI. But then they put out some guidelines on artificial intelligence. So when they put out the guidelines for teaching and learning first, there was an assumption people would be using this in the classroom. But then they put out a guide for developers.
Right.
So this is talking about, the shared accountability between the tool developers and the school district. And although a lot of the conversation is around how those tools work and the safety and security around them, it's having to encourage the dialogue and conversation and connections. So they really realized at the U.S. Office of Education Technology, Department of Education, that we need to help people and the developers of the products connect to districts to get information from districts about the tools they're creating, and the security of it. Of course, we're worried about student privacy and security, the equity issue, some of the hallucinations that Philip talked about earlier. But they literally put out a document telling developers how to connect with school districts, and that was invaluable. So the level of connection that you're referring to is, you're right, it might have been a little bit forgotten during COVID, and now we're literally putting out documents and guides to help rebuild the connections that we think were probably assumed in the past, that you've worked with the school district before you built a tool, to use with students, right? So I think that that's really interesting that that is a full circle moment for us, that we're the people that building companies and startups and developers, people who are putting up AI updates into products across the board. Most school districts are going to walk in and use tools that already have AI in them this year. So they need those updates, but it's those connections, those human connections that are going to bring this to light. So I think you're exactly right.
And One EdTech is another organization that I should allude to when it comes to interoperability and guidelines. They do good work as a not-for-profit.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to jump in on the importance of networking? Education is heavily networked, professional learning. How many conferences would you estimate you attend a year, Jen? Because I've had my share as well. There are key conferences you don't want to miss if you're in EdTech and K-12.
Oh, well, there's many, but a lot of the conferences I'm attending throughout the year, there's two places I'd like to be this week, are because we're learning and constantly evolving and want to keep up to date throughout the year. So of course we start the year with FETC, which is fabulous. There's great conferences at TCA and ISTE throughout the year for EdTech. But there's also events that you can learn and hear about the needs. So ASA is the Superintendent's Association. So I'm always attending that to see what's on the minds of superintendents. What are they looking for? So throughout the year, there's other conferences across the country to attend to keep the network strong and to also build on the information that's out there. I need to go to esports conferences. I need to go to computer science conferences, principal conferences. So anything we're bringing together, we need to be supporting them and lifting them as well.
I think there's an international one in Canada that you're going to be speaking at. It's October 31st to November 2nd, the Canadian EdTech Summit.
Fantastic.
We are
the calendar
hosting,
is marked.
so make sure that's in your calendar. I will be sending you an email because we did chat about it. But one of the interesting ones that I attended last year, and I met Alana Winnick, who was at your events presented, and also at ISTE. She wrote a book on Gen AI and education. She's brilliant. She's an IT director in one of the suburbs in New York City. And it escapes me. It's not a huge district, but nonetheless, she's an educator turned IT director. And she's part of the NYSCATE board. NYSCATE is a statewide conference in New York. And I tell the Canadian EdTechs, if you want to go into the US, it's like 2 hours from Montreal. Keep your costs down, be more local, win your backyard, but take advantage of the local regional conferences too, because there's merit in doing both. FETC is becoming more international, and proudly Canada contributes the most international folks, over 200 annually, and as we do at ISTE. And next year we're going to help expand our Can-Am to become the Can-Am International. How does that sound?
Great. I would also recommend McCall, which is the Michigan event in Detroit, where you can literally drive under the bridge and go into Canada.
Yes.
And they are, a large statewide conference that's nearby and close, and it has a lot of great companies and presence there too as well.
Well, we would love to host FETC in Canada, FETC North, perhaps we can call it. I think Amna wants to chime in.
Yeah, no, FETC Canada sounds great. But in terms of just, echoing you, Robert, with the importance of regional events, I think especially for Canadian companies, a lot of times when I'm talking to them, I ask, who else do you know in this space within Canada that's, kind of in your verticals or just kind of trying to solve the same challenge, perhaps in a different way, because I think that connection is also very important. And when it relates to my work, of course, I mentioned earlier that part of what the TCS brings to Canadian companies is international opportunities. Sometimes that can be gigs that you have to submit a bid for. And sometimes you can't do it alone. So you might need a partner. So exploring those partnerships, one really organic way of doing that is by going to these conferences and learning who else is attending, who else is trying to solve the same challenge as you, and get a conversation started, not just at the 11th hour when you really need it. To your point earlier, you
Yeah.
don't want to hear from someone and the first time you're talking to them, or maybe the first time in a long time, they need you for something, just to keep that organic network and have it growing strong. The other thing I would mention, just because it's so important when we talk about international markets, of course, the US continues to be our primary trading partner. And so there's a lot of emphasis on the US market. But over the last few years, of course, we have a growing emphasis also on helping Canadian companies find scope for their products and services internationally and look beyond the US, especially for those that are already thriving in the US, then they're looking for new sales channels. So we do have EdTech focused coverage in other markets as well. For instance, there's EdTech Asia, which is coming up later this year in the fall, in November, and that's going to be in Singapore. And I do have some colleagues working on that initiative and recruiting for that. So I can share information on those, and just, of course, you're aware of FETC and Matt Waldron and your engagement with that. So there's some things happening with the US EdTech Accelerator as well. So we're quite active in this space. We're looking to help as many Canadian companies as we can to find their network, essentially.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, over to you, Philip. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of build off Emma's point about trade shows, whenever we counsel U.S. companies, whether they're small, medium-sized, or large companies, we always typically, if they can, travel to the Canadian market and attend some of these trade shows. And as I mentioned in my previous slides, we have great representation across Canada, from East Coast to West Coast. So if there is an opportunity that a U.S. exporter sees in terms of traveling to a trade show, oftentimes we can support them at the trade show by setting up meetings ahead of time, so that they can get the most value of attending those trade shows. Because it's one thing going to a trade show and networking organically, which is great, but it's another to have some of those meetings scheduled ahead of time, where we have services to help pre-screen some of the companies and some of the contacts we introduce them to. Yeah, and just on a broader scheme about connections, I mean, that's what I do in my daily work. I'm really building connections here in Canada and the United States. I'm interacting with so many different types of companies and so many different types of people. So being able to interact with industry, getting to know the ins and outs, and being able to support my peers, counterparts, and colleagues on both sides is always very helpful, whether it's over a Teams call, whether it's an old-fashioned phone call or a coffee chat. We always try to build our connections here in Canada.
Brilliant. At this point, I'd like to reach out to our audience to see if there are any questions that they'd like to pose to you. I know we've covered a lot of bases, so I think we can add another session in the future, perhaps do these quarterly, as they're so insightful, and you don't get to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis with the diverse group that we've hosted here today. Amazing panel guests that we've had, and we'll reach out to the community to identify what are some of the priorities that they're grappling with, and bring in relevant speakers in the future as well. Speaking of events, we currently have a 30% off our early bird for our 14th Canadian EdTech Leadership Summit. That this began back in 2007, launching at York University. And it has a US connection because I did my master's in EdTech at Pepperdine, teaching old dog new tricks, and we were challenged to change the world. Well, we didn't have a national conference. We didn't have an e-magazine like eSchool News or District Admin or many of these other types in the US. So I started a conference, I started a newsletter, and proudly 17 years later, we're still publishing the newsletter. We started that first, and we launched this conference. And navigating the future education and AI-inspired world is really what it's about. And we've added a STEAM AI Innovation Showcase on the Saturday, proudly partnered with University of Toronto. Our platinum sponsor is Nelson Edwin. And we really hope that you all will join us for this event. I'm just wanting to wrap this up momentarily. Any thoughts on this, comments? How does it sound? Are we on point, I hope?
I think it's important for people to go to these events, even when they're in early stages, even if before they have their product, even before they've begun their startup, they need to be learning from this community. They need to be seeing what the issues are, what problems need to be solved, and building those relationships. So my advice would be just don't wait until you're already built something to start going places. Like definitely you should have your ear to the market long before, and this is a great experience to start with.
Thank you for those kind words. Just to share our keynote speakers that we have tapped for this event, October 31st to November 2nd. Chris Kennedy, Superintendent Schools in West Vancouver. He is the youngest superintendent ever. I think he began his career at 34 as a superintendent, and he was the first to embrace Gen AI and blogged about it, that let's not block it, let's explore it, let's understand it, let's work with it, because it's not going to stop. And Alana Winnick, I referenced earlier, author, IT director, brilliant mind, and then Steve Brown, the CEO of Nelson Edwin. That is the oldest education company in Canada with over 100 years of existence. These are some of our current partners and sponsors that we were proud of. So we've attracted both Canadian and US sponsors because obviously they have an interest in the Canadian market. Incidentally, North America is the biggest EdTech pond to want to play in for EdTechs globally. The EdTech global market is about 30 billion or so. It changes, but North America is the most desirable market opportunity that these companies see. And I just learned yesterday, Orlando is the #1 destination in the world, talking to someone who lives there, to visit,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
hence it's a very it's a nice fit for FETC to be there. Obviously, an incentive for us Canadians to want to spend more time there. And I'm looking at establishing a co-working space there because I wouldn't mind spending a little more time in warmer climates in the wintertime. Although I am a hockey player and played at 7 a.m. this morning.
Whew.
I know. It was an early start. I really like hockey. And congratulations on Florida winning the Stanley Cup, Jen. Ouch.
I was
hurt.
waiting for that comment to be next.
Well, we're waiting. We've been waiting.
Well, we have
like,
no snow.
we're like a bride in waiting for over 50 years since we last won the Stanley Cup. But with that, I want to get your concluding thoughts, perhaps. Philip, do you want to jump in and chime in on your concluding thoughts? And then we'll seek some input from the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to say this has been a really, really great presentation. I've been happy to join this morning's panel. I'll be honest, this is a sector that's quite new to me. I had the opportunity of going to the EdTech Summit last year, held at my alma mater here in Ottawa, which was a fantastic event. I had an excellent opportunity to meet guidance counselors and those in the industry. So I was really happy to be there. I had a chance to meet Amna, which great to meet you and great to be speaking alongside you today. And Robert, it was nice to further connect. EdTech, it's really important. And as you mentioned, Robert, it's not about the money. It's really about finding ways to inspire our youth and really to enhance the ability of a future generation. So I think in terms of the work that I do to assist U.S. companies and Canadian companies, specifically EdTechs, I think it's quite unique in that sense, is being able to sort of facilitate those connections and really to help education learners as well as industry stakeholders on both sides of the border.
Thank you so much for that, Philip. Emna.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And like Phil, I started covering EdTech in my role last year, so I was quite new to it. I'm still learning a lot. I'm excited about that because I love learning new things. So now my sector demands it. And it was great to meet you right at the outset of me joining the file, and then of course at the EdTech Summit, wonderful congregation of EdTech leaders, and of course meeting Phil there as well. It was great to see how we're both trying to help companies doing the same thing, but of course in different directions. So how can we work together and have that conversation going? I think this type of panel, this type of discussion is increasingly important. And, we keep going back to it, but connections, relationships, knowing who else is in this space, trying to navigate the same challenges and follow the same conversation. So thank you again for inviting me to this panel.
Sure.
And I've certainly learned a lot, and looking forward to staying in touch with everyone.
With that, thank you so much, Emna. Jennifer Womble, final thoughts.
Absolutely. I'll just say I'm just honored to be a part of this EdTech leadership group and these ideas that are coming about. Every single person today, I have learned something from new, no matter if I've been in education for 30 years or one day. So what you're doing, Robert, to create these conversations where learning can occur and business can grow are really exciting. People definitely need to continue to be a part of them and sign up and engage as much as possible. I'm also just really proud to be in a career where we are mission driven. FETC is mission driven to improve student teaching and learning through EdTech, and the outcome is our future. What the products that are being created and the things that are being shared really have an enormous impact on our future. And it's really exciting right now. There's a lot of new innovation from AI and other pieces of tech company. I don't want to just say AI, because there's a lot of really great ed tech that's at our event that isn't using AI right now. And then that's fine too. And a lot of classrooms are very empowered by ed tech and a lot of STEM products and STEAM. I'm excited to attend that STEM event because I think that that's really important for our students to get their hands on and kind of getting dirty right now and getting those experiences. So I mean, I think that it's an empowering conversation and it's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, I'm excited because this is just the beginning.
Well, thank you so much, Emna, Philip, and Jennifer. And we lost Ash, she had to run. But grateful for your contributions today. It's never been a more exciting time to be in education, I like to say, especially today with the fascination of Gen AI and the potential for impact on student learning and creating more efficiencies for teachers to take the heavy loads off them. So we've got a lot of work to do. It's not over. We're not ready to sail into the sunset. And so this concludes our first in a series of EdTech Canada webinars. Stay tuned for more to come. There's my contact information, and we could certainly put you in touch with our panel members if you desire to. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.